What makes you smile? What makes you happy?
Well, I smile at a lot of things, including bogus questions from the media, man.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. It is 90 days with Ana Marie Cox, day 84. I'm here with Beto O'Rourke. He is the founder and a volunteer with Powered by People, a registration program for voters here in Texas. I want to talk to you about that. But I also want to tell you a story that you may know because I told it to our mutual friend Andy. But I want to get your reaction. So I wrote a profile of Ted Cruz a while back when you guys were running against each other. Do you remember that? Do you remember running against Ted Cruz?
I do remember running against Ted Cruz, and I actually remember meeting you during that race. So, yes.
Okay, got our general time frame. So I was talking to someone from the Cruz campaign, and I said, is it hard for y'all to run against a cool guy? Like somebody who's like kind of the popular kid, who's like skateboards and into cool music and was in a band, and girls like him. And is that hard? And this campaign person looked at me and said, you know, in a John Hughes movie, he'd be the villain. So I want to ask you, one, have you ever thought that you might be a villain in a John Hughes movie? And two, do you get that story? I think I get that story. But first of all, John Hughes villain, no? Yes? Kinda?
No, and I'll tell you why. Despite the very generous characterization that you just offered, I, I, I was I was always throughout high school an outsider, and just I wasn't a jock. I wasn't cool. I didn't have a girlfriend. I throughout high school never had a beer. I just never really did anything that the cool kids or the popular kids did. And I was really a nerd. I was, super into punk rock at a time where that really was kind of an outsider thing. No one else was into it. You wasn't on the radio.
I remember those days.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. And and so yeah, that was kind of a surprise when people were characterizing me, some in that way during that race. So no, I always identified with the freaks and the weirdos in the John Hughes movies. Those were my people. Never the jocks or the popular kids or the prom queens or prom kids. I didn't go to prom. I didn't go to homecoming. I didn't really
Wow.
go on a date until I was in college. So that was not me.
So I believe you because I had a similar kind of, well, I'm going to call it, I did a glow up. I think you did too. But I was a total nerd and won't even tell you my horror stories about the various dances and proms and whatnot. And then I got to college and I was fortunate to pick a college that was even nerdier than I was. I went to University of Chicago. That was, the bar for being a nerd was really high. I just about met it. But I get the story that they're telling because I actually think it's related to the story that's happening now. Ted Cruz really sees himself as the outsider dork, as like the person who's been made to feel small by these people for whom socializing comes naturally. I think we have to accept that socializing does not come naturally for Ted Cruz. I think I actually find that kind of endearing about him, to be honest. But I'm a little weird about Ted Cruz because there, but for the grace of God, go I, in terms of my personality being weird. But do you understand what I mean? Like, there are these whole group of people who think that they've been excluded from what the cool kids are up to. And I think that's why these weird attacks, I wouldn't even call them attacks, but like calling them weird is really landing, is it gets a fundamental insecurity that some of these people have.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think about this very strange tweet from JD Vance where he's in this phalanx of body men approaching, or I guess walking away from the vice president's airplane. And he says, this entourage reboot is going to be dope, or is going to kill, or is going to be awesome. I forget exactly the wording. And I could not believe that he posted that. I thought maybe it was a parody or somebody making fun of what he was doing because it seemed so childish and stupid and really beneath anyone who aspires to hold the second most powerful position on the planet. But that might be what you do if you are desperate to be seen as cool, and if you somehow think the people in Entourage, who are all assholes, are the folks that you want to be, because those are the folks who maybe look down on you. I don't know. Who knows about the psychology of J.D. Vance? The guy's obviously been through a lot. He's documented that in Hillbilly Elegy. We kind of watched his evolution and the changing of his stripes just over the last few years, from Trump is akin to Hitler to Trump is the savior of Western civilization. We got to do everything we can to support him. So still someone maybe trying to find out who they are in this world, what their place is in it, what they really believe, what they're willing to fight for. And I think the real contrast is Tim Walz, who's just always been Tim Walz. He is reliably normal, and maybe that's a terrible word to use, but he's reliably a regular guy who, Ana, when I was in Congress, and these folks, you don't want to be between a member of Congress and a microphone because you're just going to get rolled over. Wasn't the case with Tim Walz. Was never looking for the spotlight, didn't want the hit on cable news, didn't have a social media profile to speak of. I don't even know if he was on social media. Was one of these nerds, to invoke that name again, who was doing his work on the Ag Committee, doing his work on the Veterans Affairs Committee, was
the very unsexy committees. I think we need to really let people know those are like the two least sexy committees in Congress, probably.
No one's covering them. You make no headlines. You're never asked to appear on the news. It's not sensational. It's not sexy. In fact, VA is where political careers go to die. If you've really fucked up, then your party's leadership is like, all right, we're sending that guy to the VA committee. Tim's one of these rare birds who asked to be on the VA committee, probably in part owing to the fidelity he has for the people with whom he served for 24 years in the Guard, and just knowing how much the VA helped him in veterans programs like the GI Bill that allowed him to afford college and was a path to a better life for him and millions of other Americans. So for me, the story of Tim Walz, what makes me so happy about it is that it shows that hard work, being a good human being, can actually pay off. And it was really kind of a shock and a surprise to me, because the laurels tend to go to people who are trying the hardest to be on that stage or to be on TV or to land that zinger. And there's a place for those people in the world for sure. But to see a guy like him come up the hard way, the real way, by doing the work and developing, I think, a following based on what he was able to accomplish and the strength of his character, I just think is a wonderful, wonderful story. And it's part of why I've got a smile on my face just almost all the time these days. You should have seen me the day that the news broke that Vice President picked him. I couldn't stop. My face hurt. I was smiling so hard. I just kept going up to my wife, Amy. I was like, can you fucking believe this? I can't believe this. Never in a million years would I think they'd pick somebody like Tim Walz, but they did. Let's go.
So I was just posting like Minneapolis punk memes all day. That was like my way of celebrating.
I saw that with Husker doing the replacements.
Yeah, Husker dude. That is Tim Walz. And also like all those America's Favorite Dad memes. Like he's the guy who asked you to take a sweater. You can't predict the weather. He's the guy who brings ice to the party. He's the guy who says, I'll watch the grill. You go get the sides ready. He is that guy, right? And it goes back a little bit to the nerd jock. We need to get rid of that distinction, right? I mean, because that doesn't really reflect high school either. But I think Walz he was the rare teacher who the nerds and the jocks both loved, right? Not in opposition. He was the football coach who also sponsored the Gay Straight Student Alliance, right? And I think all of us some of us were lucky enough to have like a teacher like that in our lives that we felt was just cool, right? Like you could go talk to. They did some cool, stereotypical, popular thing like coach the football team, but then also like hung out after class. And I guess he played Dreamcast, which is also kind of a really deep cut as far as like, video games go. And I think, and it's funny, when everyone is doing Tim Walz memes, one of the funniest to me was how would he react to JD Vance on the stage? Because as the kind of teacher he was, you almost think of him as going over to JD and being like, look, guy, you don't want to be here. Like you've made some mistakes. We all love you. We all, no matter what happens, we love you. But you're going in a bad direction. But why do you think Republicans feel so attacked by the weird? Like,
I don't know, but I think part of the genius of it, which, as far as we know, Tim Walz, it's hard to believe that it was poll tested or focus group approved or concocted in a political corporate laboratory. It's just this guy's gut reaction to what are truly some bizarre policy proposals, the decline cognitively, openly of Donald Trump, and the extremely strange and yes, very weird things that he's saying. This chameleon transformation of JD Vance from someone who I think really was trying to pursue a principled path in public life. Before he ran for Senate.
You're generous.
Well, I for one believe that. I'll tell you what, I did when he hit the scene. I thought, okay, I'm really interested in what this guy has to say and what he's trying to explain. I didn't grow up in the Midwest. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, on the border. I'd love to know this guy's story, and perhaps that may reflect other stories that I'm unaware of. And then there's just this crashing descent into personal ambition. I don't know if you listened to the Daily interviewed a very good friend of his at the time from Yale, who happens to be transgender, with whom he would debate, but respectfully. There was mutual admiration and even love that they expressed to one another, platonic love, like, you're someone that I have grown close to, I support, even if we disagree on some of the issues. Man, I could really respect that. I loved that about him. And then to hear how crushed this person was by being cast aside by JD Vance when it was to his personal benefit politically and in pursuit of his ambitions, I think was really telling about him. And so, yeah, I mean, this stuff, it is weird. And I think it also removed something that I think has plagued Democrats, which is it's not unfair or inaccurate to say that the reelection of Donald Trump might very well spell the doom of this democracy. It might end this extraordinary experiment 248 years into the program. And the things that he's talking about and has done to people are just unbelievably cruel. And it's really something that we should be aware of and take seriously. Okay, everybody gets that. But then to be able to say, but you know what? But it's also really weird and really strange. And they do not hold this invincible power over us. Like, we have some agency in this. There are things that we can do: registering voters, talking to our friends and neighbors, and also running on offense and stop being defensive about everything and explaining ourselves and saying what I really meant to say was this. Tim Walz as governor ran the tables on the things that people care about, not even just Democrats: protecting a woman's right to choose, making sure that hungry kids have food in their belly so that they're ready to learn over the course of the day, $1 billion for affordable housing, and just governing with the decency and respect that we should be able to expect from people in positions of public trust. So I think the contrast and the selection by Kamala Harris is just genius. And I think that it also has a lot to do with this contrast between weird and then people who take this job seriously. And that's the Harris Walz ticket.
I completely agree with you. That's what I was saying in that double whammy of picking the picking Walz and picking Vance. The Vance couch thing, which we don't have to talk about, but I actually think of as a key watershed moment in this whole thing, because suddenly, like, it was like just this wild, hilarious idea that was more of a meme than a real, like, rumor, right? Like, it was sort of like the Ted Cruz Zodiac killer thing. Like, we all know this is not true, but it's just a funny thing to say. And people were having fun with it, right? And also, it was a way of being, they're weird, not they're going to take all our rights away. Like, these weirdos are going to take all of our rights away, right? Reminding us that the rights part is really important, but there's also just like, we don't have to think of them as scary. We can think of them as weird, as strange, as odd, as like screwed up in their own way. And then picking Walz, like on the other end of that, it was this reminder of like, all of those things are at stake, but this can be fun. This can be something that we enjoy doing, right?
Yeah. And when is the last time we had that in American politics? I mean, and when's the last time you saw Democrats
Obama,
smiling?
maybe.
They're smiling now.
Maybe. Like 2008? I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
it sure feels like that to me. It really does. And to see, I know crowd size isn't everything, but it's certainly everything to Donald Trump. To see these arenas in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, filled to the brim, the joy that is there. And it's not dragging people down. It's not dismissing whole sections of the American public. It's just saying, hey, these are the things that we're for. We all know that we're on a roll. You see the bounce in the vice president's step, the confidence that really, I think for whatever reason had been lacking, at least consistently before. She has got it. I mean, she has got it now. And Walz does too. I saw a clip of him yesterday, and he was talking about what it was like to be selected and then, immediately to be on this airplane, to be going to give this big speech. And he said, it's the first time I'd ever used a teleprompter. I think that is really telling about this guy's political career and his trajectory, that he's gotten there by just putting his head down and doing the work, not looking at teleprompters and not playing the traditional game. And I think we're all excited for that. I think there's still a premium on authenticity and honesty and people being real. And I think it's part of the appeal of Donald Trump. No one would cook up that crazy shit that he says. I really believe that the thoughts that are coming out of his mouth were formulated in his own head and no one else. And there's something that's genuinely riveting about that. Maybe like a train wreck. But with Walz, it's that same thing. It's my son Ulysses put it this way. He said, "Dad, I feel like both Trump and Walz don't have filters, but Walz good stuff comes out and Trump bad stuff comes out." And I think there's a joy in that. Like, I think we really love being with real people, seeing real people do well and be themselves. And I certainly feel that way about the vice president as well. I think she's stepping out from behind this, secondary role far in the background through much of this administration for whatever reason. I don't know how that stuff works, but her ascent and her stepping forward, it's just opened up worlds of possibilities for us. And I think we cannot discount the power of that. And I think you see it reflected in the fundraising numbers. You certainly see it reflected in these 3 Battleground polls that came out showing Kamala at 50 and Trump at 46. That's a lead that they can build on. I truly believe, especially as Trump continues to scramble, unable to land a punch or to figure out his strategy. It's almost, even though he knew, he had to have known this was going to be a possibility, he just banked everything on Biden being the nominee through Election Day in November.
Let's talk more about joy and smiling, because I do remember when you ran for Senate against Cruz, again, so long ago, so very long ago. There was a lot of smiling then, a lot of fun, I think, and it mirrors where we are right now just a little bit, because there was a concept of how weird Ted Cruz is, right? And I think that in some ways that race is a model for this one. Let's hope not too much of a model in terms of outcome. But there was a defanging of the opposition, right? And like we had a lot of fun making fun of Ted Cruz, and also it could happen, it could happen, it could happen. And after that, and then also the other losses Democrats have suffered in Texas, it has been really depressing to be a Texan, basically. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm from Austin. I love my state. Whenever anyone says, oh, you don't like the politics, you should leave, I can tear up. I get so angry about it. But are you starting to see that joy and that feeling like, wow, this really could happen, we really could make this happen here? Like, I know you run Powered by People. It's a voter registration program here in Texas that's really about individuals reaching individuals. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you can't escape the frustration that all of us who are involved in this work are bound to feel at some point or another. I mean, how many times have we had our hearts broken by the state of Texas? And yet,
not just in football either.
Right. And yet, beyond the easy metrics like, excitement on social media or political donations or, any of these other things that you can quantify, the fact that volunteers are out there right now, standing on college campuses during move-in days at University of North Texas in Denton, for example, and without being paid a dime and being in some pretty miserable conditions in terms of the weather and the heat and the humidity, they are going through the certification process to become a volunteer deputy registrar. They're talking to complete strangers, these 18 and 19-year-olds who are not registered, who are likely Democrats, who are probably going to vote for Harris Walz if they cast a ballot. They're making sure to get them on the rolls. And then importantly, they're asking those new voters permission to stay in touch with them and serving as their personal Sherpas, navigating the most onerous Byzantine election laws in America, bar none. I mean, it's almost a reversion to pre-1965 Voting Rights Act, how hard Texas makes it, especially for young people and people who live in big cities like Houston, Texas, or Austin even, or Dallas or El Paso, where I am. And so that's my measure of this moment, that so many people are signing up to do this work. And this is in an age where we try to sell one another on comfort and convenience. Just do this one thing. This isn't going to hurt at all.
One easy trick
in the world. And our message is, it's like those Army ads when we were growing up in the 80s. It's the toughest job you're ever going to love. Like, hey, let me just be clear. This is going to kind of suck. You're going to be sweating through your clothes. You're going to have people who want to have no part of what you're doing, but you're going to break through to people who could very well be the margin of victory in close state house races. 3 of the closest congressional races in the country are in Texas. And look, maybe, just maybe, we got 2.5 points close to Ted Cruz in 2018. Hundreds of thousands have registered since then. He is just as, if not more, despised now than he was then. And you have this all-star bipartisan member of Congress in Colin Allred who's running against him. Could we make up the difference with new registrants in Texas right now? I mean, no one knows the answer to that, but the number of people who are trying to, through their actions, get us there, to me, is really inspiring. And to your question, reflective of that joy translated into action, and I hope outcomes that allow us to win some of these big races.
And that's the difference of your organization, right? Is that individual one-to-one piece, is the Sherpa process. Because like I tell everyone about Texas, the cities are all blue. Like, this is not a red state. This is a polka dot state, right? And it does have the worst voter suppression laws in the country. And if everyone in Texas could vote, if we all voted, everyone who could vote, we'd be blue and blue and blue all the way through. Well, I mean, there's some of the rural stuff, maybe not. Although the rural people would get their hospitals if they voted blue.
I heard you talking about that on the previous show. No state has lost more rural hospitals than the state of Texas. No state has more people who are uninsured. No state has more kids dying of diabetes. A totally preventable, miserable death that we inflict on the most vulnerable among us. And guess what? Texas invented Medicaid. Lyndon Baines Johnson signed that sucker into law in the summer of 1965. We have left billions of dollars on the table that could have gone to these rural public hospitals that would have saved lives and made lives better. So you're absolutely right. I mean, the majority of Texans do not want the most obscene abortion ban in America. They don't want us to lead the nation in school shootings, which we do more than 2 years after the Uvalde massacre that took the lives of 21 beautiful human beings who didn't deserve that at all. No one wants the power grid to completely fail and kill 700 people, many of whom froze to death in their homes. I mean, no majority in this state supports that. But when you have millions of people who are effectively and functionally prevented from voting, these are the results that you get. And it's not a mystery to me why it is happening. And I've said this before, but I just think it bears repeating. You have Obama losing Texas by 16 points in 2012. 4 years later, Hillary brings it down to single digits, 9 points in 2016. In 2020, Biden loses by 5.5, so 16 to 9 to 5.5. It is all but inevitable. The Republican leadership in this state knows that. It's just a matter of time and effort. They forestall it by these voter suppression and intimidation tactics that are legislated, signed by the governor, and really disproportionately impact young people, communities of color, and urban centers like Harris County, a county of 5 million people that was allowed one drop-off box for ballots during the middle of the worst pandemic to ever hit this country. So that's what we're up against. But in another reference to Walz and Clear Eyes, Full Hearts, and the kind of football coach, we're the.
Oh my God, that T-shirt needs to happen.
Totally.
That Walz T-shirt needs to happen.
Totally. But we know that we have to get back out on the field. We have to keep pushing and fighting, and it is a matter of time and effort. But the more of us who put in the effort, the greater the effort we put in, the shorter the wait. We are going to get there. And so that's what drives me and what keeps me in Texas. And to the very good question you asked, and it's passed my mind as well, like, hey, I'm raising a 16-year-old daughter with my wife, Amy, here in this state that does not believe in her bodily autonomy or her ability to make her own decisions about her own future. Are we doing her wrong by raising her here? Should we move somewhere else? The thing is, if we move somewhere else, who is left behind to fight this on their own? We all got to stick together and be in this and see it through to the end. And that, to me, is also a matter of joy. I mean, there's something really fun about doing this work when you know what you're up against, eyes wide open, but that you're doing this with great people who are part of the program, and that we're going to get there, and we're going to get there together.
So I'm going to bring it back to Tim Walz. Also fun to talk about.
Yeah.
You served with him. You talked about a lot of cool things about him. What's the thing you dislike the most about Tim Walz?
I didn't understand. Well, I have a thing with anybody who doesn't drink coffee. I just don't get it. How do you work? How do you operate? And this guy, when I first met him, I think was on I don't know how many bottles of Mountain Dew a day habit, but it would start, the committee hearings at, 8:30, 9 a.m. in the morning. There's Tim Walz with the bottle of Mountain Dew in front of him. He's now switched to Diet Mountain Dew, which of course is wonderful for your health. So I don't know if I despise that or don't like it. I just totally do not understand it. I couldn't do that to my system. I don't know how he does it to his. I'll tell you an endearing thing about him. When he invited me to go see Springsteen with him in New Jersey, I booked the only hotel I could find, which was just one of the worst dumps I've ever stayed in. And I've stayed in 1,000 hotel rooms over the last, 8 or 9 years. It's right across from Meadowlands or MetLife or whatever they call that stadium where the Boss is going to play. But because it's New Jersey and it's America, even though I can see the stadium, you can't walk to it. It's just like circled by highways and overpasses and feeder roads. And I text Walz and I say, hey, there's a little restaurant at an adjoining hotel down the road. I'm going to walk over there. If you have some time, I'd love to meet you there and buy you dinner. And he writes back, he says, great, let's meet up at 6. I go down to my hotel lobby, and again, it's, bulletproof plexiglass where the attendant is. The carpet has all manner of stains on it. Light bulbs are flickering. It's just a really gross, dump place. And there's Tim Walz the governor of Minnesota, staying in the same dump that I am, and where I'm kind of bitching and complaining about it to myself and texting my wife, being like, God, I can't believe I couldn't find a better place. This guy is just so happy to be alive and on the planet and to go see Bruce Springsteen. He could give a shit about the conditions in his room. And it made me want to check myself and be like, look, if the governor of the state of Minnesota is okay with this place, I got to be okay with this place. And that's really just Tim Walz. He doesn't sweat the small stuff. He doesn't get angry or uptight. He's just really loose and focused on the things that matter. Like, how fucking lucky are we that we're about to go see Bruce Springsteen right now? Nothing else matters. So I want to be more like him, in other words.
Can he handle a hatch chili?
I don't know. I've never.
Because Minnesotans kind of famous. Like, one time I went someplace and asked for salsa, and they're like, we have ketchup. So I lived there for 10 years. Sorry, back up a little bit for that. So
I don't know. You know what? I bet you I could beat him on the chili front. And where he beats me is, we would go on these morning runs, and it would be, 15, 17, 20 degrees. And I'm 7 layers in, coming from the desert Southwest in El Paso. And Walz is there literally in a T-shirt and shorts, and he's not cold. And, again, to his character, he's not trying to be tough. That's just who you are when you come from Minnesota. So he can beat me there. I bet you I could beat him on the hatch green chili and my tolerance for heat.
Okay. Last question. Actually, before my last question, do you have anything else?
No, I think this conversation with you and what has just changed in American politics with the Harris-Walz ticket just reminds me again how important joy is. And I think we've really lost sight of it for understandable reasons. We went through a mother of a pandemic. We're still coming out of some really tough economic times. People are having their rights and freedoms stripped from them day by day, state by state. We might very well lose our democracy. So plenty of reason to be serious and somber. But you cannot operate on that alone. You need a reason to smile and to be joyful and to get up in the morning. And I think this ticket and what you and I are talking about is a big part of why I'm so optimistic about being successful in November, certainly for the White House with Harris and Walz, but even, and I know this is an outside shot, but even for what we are pursuing in Texas, a Senate seat pickup, winning 3 really competitive congressional seats, state house hangs in the balance, and local elections that really are going to determine the kinds of lives that people can lead across the 254 counties of Texas. So let us not forget that because, I know there are rougher days ahead. I know that at some point the Trump campaign is going to find its footing and they're going to level some really massive attacks on our ticket and on our side and on people that we love. And we have to be serious. We have to be determined. But I think we also have to remember the joy. And thank God for Harris-Walz reminding us of that.
I completely agree. And so another joyful question. I asked you to think about this. What should Walz walk-up music be?
When you asked me to think about it, you put it within the context of the Replacements, which I'm sure everyone knows this, and if you don't, you should. They're from Minnesota.
They're from Minneapolis. They are from Minneapolis.
Yeah. Along with Prince and Dylan and Husker Du that we talked about earlier, and Lizzo, and so many great musicians and acts that have come out of Minnesota. Just one of my all-time favorite. And in fact, after I went to the Springsteen concert with Governor Walz, I sent him the new box set for the remastered Tim album. which is just extraordinary. If you don't yet own this, Anna, you need to go out there.
I don't have the remaster. No.
And he really appreciated it. He said, hey, next time you're in Minnesota, let's go hit up Westerberg's house. I don't know if that was a real offer, but I'd love to take him up on it. So within the context of the replacements, the lyrics aren't necessarily going to be appropriate, but the opening lines of Bastards of Young are just phenomenal. It's just soaring, uplifting. It just, for me, I get chills. You could also take it another direction, and Alex Chilton, really upbeat, amazing song in itself. And then my last one of the trifecta is Can't Hardly Wait, which I think lyrically, not all the lyrics, but the chorus for sure. And then just again the driving beat, the energy in that song. I think those could all three be terrific walkout opportunities for Walz. Let me turn it back on you, and I won't limit you to the replacements. But what would you recommend for the walkout song?
Well, of course, as a joke, I suggested Here Comes a Regular, which is all wrong on everything but the title.
That's a sad song.
That's a really sad song. It's about being an alcoholic. No, don't use that. I'm going to go outside the replacements, and it's also not an ideal song for like a stadium walk-up, but it would really make me happy, is Husker Du, New Day Rising.
Oh, I love that song. I love that album.
I love that album, and it's also the first punk rock song I ever really heard. And for people who don't know, it's basically just Bob Mould screaming the lyrics, New Day Rising, New Day Rising, New Day Rising. Over and over. I don't know, that kind of is what it feels like right now. New Day Rising. I shouldn't try to sing.
Off that same album, you could do Celebrated Summer, which is...
Oh, yeah.
This is our celebrated summer right now. You know, the summer of our discontent turned into our celebrated summer. Like, no one knew this was coming, and no one knew how badly they wanted this ticket until it arrived. And then you just see, it's gangbusters. I love it. So it is an embarrassment of riches that we can mine from Minneapolis punk rock for Tim Walz's walkout.
They gave us Tim Walz. The least we can do is give the world, more of like replacements and Husker Du. So
that's right.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I love talking to you. And you are now a volunteer for, but as well as the founder of Powered by People. People can find out more about it at poweredxpeople.org. And we'd love to have you volunteer. Certainly if you're in Texas, we want to help get you trained to become a VDR. And if you're outside of Texas, there's actually volunteer opportunities for you as well. So come join us. You did that great direct camera thing there, and I was like, oh, is he asking me to volunteer? Me personally?
Yes, I am.
I mean, sure. Yes, I am. Sure. All right, this has been 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox, and it is 90 days. 84 days, Beto. 84 days.
Let's go.